Hello, everyone. With a few minutes delay, we're kicking off a fantastic edition of LinkedIn Live. Today, we're going to be talking about decarbonizing the telecom industry. For those of you that are joining in for the first time, a LinkedIn Live series that we've been doing for the last few months, focused on net zero. How do businesses achieve that? And especially, we speak to heads of sustainability, but also experts in particular fields to learn about the specific tactics that they've been applying on day-to-day basis in order to make their project successful. We've spoken about sustainable materials. We're going to be speaking about the food system soon. Before that, we spoke about how to engage students and also the younger generation in being part of your sustainability journey. Today, I have the great honor to invite here Therese, who is the head of sustainability of Vodafone, and she will be telling us a bit more about what does it mean to decarbonize telecom. Hi, Therese.
Hi, Lubomila. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be able to speak to you. We've known each other now for quite a bit, and you have been pioneering some projects in your industry. So hopefully today we'll be able to cover a lot of ground. Before we kick it off, a few maybe basics for those that are joining a LinkedIn Live for the first time. You can leave comments in the chat, and also you can share your questions that I will make sure we cover along the way in this wonderful discussion. So, kicking it off a bit with statistics about Vodafone, which is obviously quite of a big conglomerate. It is the largest mobile and fixed network operator in Europe. There's more than 300 million mobile customers, 27 million fixed broadband customers, and 22 million TV customers. For sustainability, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to allow you to tell us a bit more, but maybe we can hear as a kickoff, how did you even get into this topic? How did sustainability get into your professional life?
I feel like that came from my private life, actually. I grew up on a countryside in Austria, so it was always kind of normal to get our food from the farmers, go into the woods, climb the mountain on the weekends. And that's just something that I really wanted to kind of like proceed in my professional life as well, which is why I joined Vodafone 1.5 years ago, because I just really love the combination of sustainability and digitization.
And what does it mean to be head of sustainability? What exactly do you do on daily basis, and how does this connect to the industry in which you operate?
Um, so I am heading the sustainability team in at Vodafone Germany, but we're a huge international company. We have more than 100,000 employees worldwide, and Germany alone has 16,000 of those. So that means it's basically trying to get everyone on board on that ESG agenda. So a few years ago, we decided on having a strategy towards our net zero targets. And ever since, we've been working to achieve those. So that's basically what it means. We are in charge of not only the ecological environment or the environmental part of ESG, but of all three dimensions. So it's a very exciting journey because we really work cross-functional with every single business unit in a business, and that means we're focusing on consumers as well as business customers, but also working a lot with finance, technology, etc.
Mhm. We did some digging about Vodafone in particular, and we found out that you're purchasing 100% of your electricity from renewable, and that happened already in July 2021 in Europe. And then for the rest of the world, you're going for 2025. There's also the reusing, reselling, and recycling of 100% of redundant network equipment. Um, then there's also like the reduction plan for emissions by 50% by 2025, and then of course becoming net zero by 2040. um, how do these big projects kick off and then they get to be implemented? You clearly are a lot more ahead of many players in your own industry, but also just in general, what we see in Plan A by working with so many different corporates is that they're quite behind on a lot of these big steps that obviously take time, the collaboration of different stakeholders. Um, Have you been, and maybe we can make it very practical, like, can you think of one project that you kicked off and then you saw it through the collaboration, but then up until completion that makes you proud?
Um, so maybe to your first questions, right? It's super important to have ambitious target, I think. And if you don't set yourself targets, then you're not going to be ambitious about that. So that's something that both our CEO as well as everyone among the employees is really, really agrees upon. And one recent project that we have launched with our consumer business unit actually is the so-called one for one promise. We launched that in June, and that means that for every single phone that we give out to customers, to private customers, we bring one back and take one device that is end of life back. And that's our first step towards tackling the huge e-waste problem. Um, Another fact about the e-waste problem is that there are just so many countries in the world that do not have proper recycling facilities just yet. And we take back those devices, those end of life devices, in countries that do not have those facilities or recycling sites just yet. And in the long term, together with our collaboration partner, Closing the Loop, we want to create jobs through that, but also avoid that electronic waste is not getting recycled properly. So that's something that I'm really proud of, because that's over 1 million phones every single year.
Maybe just to take a step back, because I am sure that a big part of the audience is familiar with the waste issue. But for those of you new to the topic, e-waste is the fastest growing waste stream worldwide. And that is essentially all of our electronic devices, smartphones as one example, but also toasters and washing machines that essentially are not built in a manner that are easy to recycle. Our waste management systems are not necessarily, exactly as you say, prepared for that. So ultimately, they end up in a landfill, or through some loopholes, as we know, in the hands of people supposedly as secondhand devices, but not really working. This is quite of a big issue, and I think there's been now even legislation that is coming up related to that in the EU. Um, how do you think about the balance of responding to legislation, but then also being proactive? Clearly, you have tackled a lot of issues before someone told you to do so. But what is the balance that you need to strike? Because obviously, sustainability is starting to be encoded into the way businesses operate, especially in the European Union.
Um, the balance is sometimes tricky, but there are a lot of really, really good things happening. For example, the right to repair that is going to be implemented very soon, which is part of the EU Green Deal. And the taxonomy, all of those things that obviously affect us as a big company. So every single law that's being put out there does apply to Vodafone, as well as the Supply Chain Act that is going to be introduced in Germany up from next year. And of course, we do have to be proactive about that. And we have been actually. So the right to repair is something that doesn't really strike us as a surprise. We have been doing or offering a lot of repair services to our customers in the last few years. And I think what you just addressed with the phones that can't really be recycled, they can't even be repaired properly. So the legislation really, really has to address the manufacturers as well, and really get some legislation implemented to be able to repair those phones, and through that be able to use it for longer than just a year or two.
Mm-hmm. It is a major issue, and I think where optimization for a beautiful design has won, sometimes maybe practicality of how you can get to repair that has not necessarily worked. Um, I think there's been quite a lot of exciting also campaigns that have been coming out of Vodafone. I don't think you're the kind of company that shies away also speaking about your commitments to sustainability. Um, from your perspective, what has made you and your team feel comfortable to be so out there with all the campaigns that you do? Is it the sense of urgency that you feel about the problem? Is it the fact that you've accomplished things? The reason why I'm asking this question is because we often see in the companies that we work with a bit of hesitance to communicate until they've not been able to really hit the target and be out there with like this big achievement. Whereas you've achieved, but then also you're still on the journey for other topics. What has made you feel confident to go out and be so proactive?
We just have the strong feeling that without ambitious targets, you are not going to work on them ambitiously, which is why we set them ourselves. And also, we have a very strong collaboration between every business department, but also our executive committee who really supports that journey. So it's a mixture of a grassroots movement and as well as a decision from the executive board to really do that. And when that works together, I feel like you can achieve those ambitious targets. Obviously, we are dependent on our environment, on external factors and external stakeholders. But if we as a huge corporate don't start setting targets, then no one else is going to do it, right?
Hmm. This comment really nicely ties with one of the questions we're getting from the audience, which is about how does Vodafone engage their employees? You mentioned the management. One of the ways in which we met one another was through one of the initiatives that I know
Yeah.
it's been quite inspirational to me. I definitely have mentioned it to a bunch of companies. Can you share a bit more of how you engage your employees on sustainability topics?
Yeah, so we are super lucky that we have a team of people who do the work voluntarily, and that's our so-called Team Green. That was founded by two of my colleagues, Andrea and Alexandra, a few years ago, and they've actually um, convinced more than 1,000 of our colleagues to join them on their journey. So that's something really exciting because it's not only a sustainability team, but also a team of people doing it besides their actual jobs. And then we have, of course, given that we're such a big company, implemented a structure behind that as well. So we have certain spokes, we have a mandate for the ESG work in every single business unit. Um, we have various learning opportunities for our employees. So we have the so-called Vodafone University, where we put in more and more workshops for people to really learn about that, because you, of course, also need the expertise to bring forward projects such as the One for One promise.
Wow, this is quite amazing, and I'm even seeing that in the comments. There's one that is saying, "I'm definitely biased, but Vodafone's One for One project is truly inspirational." Can you just give us a bit of an insight? Because if so many people respond like you did, clearly there's something about it there.
What do you mean? An
Just
insight of.
explain to us what exactly this project is. You mentioned, can also your clients get involved with it? Like, of course, you did give an explanation about it, but what are the ways in which people can engage with this project beyond the employees, I guess? And yeah.
So, one thing that you as a consumer can just be very sure about is once you buy a phone at Vodafone Germany at the moment, then this is going to be waste compensated for now, because there are 210 million phones in the drawers of Germans at the moment. And we are not going to be able to get all of those 200 million phones back just yet, which is why we said, okay, but we need to start somewhere. So from now on, once you buy a phone at Vodafone Germany, you can at least be sure that you will have an eco rating, that you can look at whether you can recycle that phone, whether you can get it repaired, where the eco score of that phone stands. You can be sure that you have the possibility to get it repaired in our stores. And then we take care of the recycling, but also take one back that's end of life to get those rare earths and valuable resources back.
Amazing. This is fantastic. And I think for those that didn't know about this, they should definitely check out more, I'm sure, on your website. So after again some digging, there's been a clear indication on your website and on all of your communication materials that there's three purpose pillars that you focus on: digital society, inclusion for all, and planet. Um, can you tell us about these three pillars and how does Vodafone take action to act on them, or what are the particular projects involved in each one of them, so that you essentially stand for this strategy?
Yeah, so that's really a group strategy that is implemented in every single one of the country organizations individually. But what it is really about is digital inclusion, because you won't be able to get information if you don't have access to various telecommunications tools. And that's one of, and I saw that under your LinkedIn post, someone asked about the metrics that we would use in the telecommunications industry. And one of the most important metrics is actually making the internet and 4G and 5G accessible to as many people as possible. And through that, improve their lives because they get access to actual information, and through that are also able to engage in the daily business life, normal life, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, exciting. And inclusion for all, like, I guess this is, but all of these three pillars, they're embedded in every project that is associated to sustainability in one way or another.
Yeah, it's our purpose pillars, and it does go hand in hand with all the three dimension of ESG.
Mm-hmm.
And digital inclusion is just something that's very, very close to our heart. For example, M-Pesa, the online paying platform that we introduced a few years back on the African continent. And in Germany, for example, that's we have an initiative called Coding for Tomorrow. It's that was implemented by the Vodafone Foundation, and that's really about bringing girls into tech very early on, and through that also um, create equity and yeah, inclusion for women and girls as well.
Amazing. It's really difficult to keep track of all the initiatives that you
It is
mentioned.
for me as well.
It's quite impressive. Like that, there's an now I want to speak about another one, which is the Sustainability Council. Can you give us a bit of a flavor what exactly the Sustainability Council is and how does it influence decision making within the company?
The Business Council or the Sustainability Advisory Council is very important for us because, as you know yourself, the industry is very new, right? And we have to have someone who really challenges us on our projects and who challenges the credibility, whether it makes sense, what we're planning, etc. So that's a council of seven people, seven experts who come from the political sector, who come from science, but also from other corporates. And through that, we have a really broad set of various expertise that helps us to improve our projects, and that help us, especially to really reflect on what we're doing and always ask ourselves whether what we're doing is right.
Yeah, this sounds really exciting, and it's really great that you have this external perspective because I guess when companies only looking at their own decision making power and patterns, they're most likely making similar choices to the ones they've done before. We have a lot of questions from the audience, and I think your industry and decarbonization is clearly something that is interesting for many. Maybe I'll pick up just this one, which is related to the fact that as connectivity reaches further the corners of the world, the telecom industry's global energy use will continue to rise. How do you increase network capacity while reducing energy usage?
Everything's about efficiency in the telecommunications industry because, as Mina is totally right about, the data usage is only going to increase. And if we don't make our services more efficient, the energy usage is going to increase as well. So that's what we really don't want. So in the last few years, especially through 5G, the data usage has increased heavily. But as 5G is so much more efficient than 4G, and we talk about energy usage per data volume, in the business terminology, it has the data or the energy usage has not increased, even though the data usage has increased heavily. And that's really something that we are working on every single day, basically connecting everything, making things transparent through that, and really understanding where do I have my highest energy usage and how can I now reduce that through, for example, IoT, smart meters, artificial intelligence. We've done it ourselves at the Vodafone office. And just by connecting things and making it transparent where we use most energy, we were able to reduce our energy usage by 23% within 2 years.
Wow, this is really
Yeah.
impressive. Um, I'm assuming that along the way of being able to tick off all these boxes with all the different projects that you have kicked off, it's not always been really straightforward to A, on one hand, align all the stakeholders, but then B, also be able to kind of go without challenges that could be related to science, that could be related to getting the right expertise in house. Can you walk us through some of the challenges that you have faced down implementing kind of some of these initiatives and yeah, what can businesses learn from your own expertise about this?
So I feel like there are two sides to challenges always, the internal side as well as the external side. And external challenges that we are really facing is our dependency from on manufacturers, because we don't produce products ourselves. So, and we are just a reseller of phones, for example, which is why we rely heavily on Apple, Samsung, and all those big corporates that whose names everyone knows, I guess, having a sustainability strategy themselves. And that's something that is a huge challenge. And of course, all the legislation that is coming hand in hand. For example, we have the National Supply Chain Act that is going to be implemented from January onwards in Germany. But then the EU at the same time is planning a supply chain act themselves. So those are things that are challenging to monitor and to kind of like understand what we should do now if something is going to be published in only half a year. And the internal challenges that we really had in the beginning is that everyone was so excited about it. And I know that sounds more positive than negative, but in a 16,000 people company, when everyone just like does their own thing and works on sustainability, that's great, but you have to have that overall strategy and you have to kind of like keep an overview of which project could work with another project. So that was one of the biggest internal challenges that we actually had.
That's this is a problem that I hope more and more businesses will have to face because everyone finally understands the value of sustainability for the
Exactly.
longevity of a business. There's quite a lot of questions on the topic of target setting, scope three. Maybe we can just kind of take one that, and I'll just group them up, but then kicking off with what does Vodafone do if the targets are not met on sustainability? Maybe how do you tackle like projects maybe not going according to plan?
Then we're going to be transparent about it. As I said, there are always going to be external factors as well as internal factors that might risk achieving certain targets or implementing certain projects. And that means we have to adjust. We have to become even more ambitious and just stick to those targets, but also understand why we didn't why we didn't reach certain targets. There is the war in the Ukraine going on. We have a huge energy crisis through that, that of course risks certain things. But at the same time, it does really show how much we need green electricity on the other hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are going to be honest if we do not meet targets, but so far we luckily have met them.
Yeah, that's a good situation to be in, but obviously transparency and explaining to companies that this is and to clients, anyone that is of your stakeholders that matter to you, about the fact that this is a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. It's really, at least from my learnings within Plan A, the most fundamental kind of lesson that needs to be gathered by businesses because it is not a straightforward initiative.
Exactly.
It could be the enthusiasm of the employees. It could be the many initiatives, but ultimately it needs to lead the same topic. Um, The topic of scope 3 is also covered in a few questions. I'm just going to take this one, which is, how do you think about tackling your scope 3 emissions in terms of engaging hundreds of different suppliers and stakeholders? How do you push everyone to think in this sustainable Vodafone way?
So on the supply side, it's really about having conversations, and that's something where legislation really, really helps us, because legislation ultimately leads to other corporates having sustainability strategies as well, and that's something really good. That we've seen in the last few months is that we really start to work with our biggest suppliers on tackling those scope 3 emissions as well, because we are their customer, their supplier, so we both have to work on the same emission components, right? And on the other hand, on our customer and consumer side, we are implementing services that are going to reduce the scope 3 emissions ultimately, such as leasing options for our business customers. So the ownership of the phone is not with them anymore, and it certainly goes back into the circular economy after using the phone, things like that. And but the supplier side, of course, is a bit trickier.
Yeah, the supplier side, obviously, this is where there's a lot of building blocks to be aligned. We also have a question that I found really interesting, which is the kind of coming from another channel that is not LinkedIn, which is specifically dedicated to asking about the telecom sector, and has clearly made a tremendous effort to greening their industry. What can other industries and companies, for that matter, learn from your transition to net zero? What do you think are the overlaps between industries? Clearly, if I can just sum up some of the things that you mentioned, you spoke about collaboration, you spoke about starting with yourself, you spoke about engaging employees, but what really has been maybe a fundamental pillar to your success in sustainability that maybe other industries even can learn from?
I think every single company just has to know what their own corporate carbon footprint is before starting with the strategy, right? So if you know what your numbers look like, then you can see where the biggest chance to really decrease CO2 emissions are. And with our data centers, electricity was one of the biggest chunks that we were able to address. But that might not apply to other industries. For us as a non-manufacturing industry, a huge part of our emissions is scope 3, and scope 1 and 2 is mainly electricity, and that's why we changed to green electricity fast. But for other industries, that might be something else. What I just really think is that it's often or it's sometimes not clear how much electricity is actually, or how much CO2 electricity is actually emitting.
Yeah. And that's because obviously, and the energy mix is not always transparent. Also, times of the day even not associated to a mix that maybe is the one that is confirmed and so on. So definitely quite a lot of challenges. And who are the people that you normally work with on some of these projects? That is it only people within your sustainability department, or do you also collaborate with other departments extensively?
We collaborate with every single department. I feel like sometimes I collaborate with departments that I didn't even know that existed until the day that I collaborate with them. But
Can you
that's
give an example? Sorry.
um, very specific teams, for example, in finance or in technology. So I can't really like give an example, but they're like, again, 16,000 employees. So we have squads on every single project that Vodafone is working on. And of course, there's a lot more happening than just sustainability, but that's really what is exciting about it, as the targets that we have set ourselves apply to every single person in the company. Everyone works on them with their individual expertise, and that means the consumer business unit works on circular economy efforts, for example, for consumers, whereas finance is working on how we can tackle reporting and the Supply Chain Act, things like that. Legal is working a lot with us on what the EU Green Deal means for companies such as ours. And we in the sustainability team are in charge of really maintaining an overview of what is happening. And also, I sometimes call ourselves a bit in-house consultants, because that's really what we do as well, working on every single project with the other departments in order to achieve those companies' goals.
This is a really nice leeway to the topic of embedding sustainability into every single department. You did mention ESG KPIs within different departments. Um, there is a question that is specifically dedicated to procurement, and this is how do you embed sustainability and procurement choices going forward to be impacted by this thinking that clearly is really penetrating all levels of the company, but mm it probably would also mean that a lot of the established processes need to be refurbished or so. Has this happened? Is it already part of the decision making?
Yes, it is. We look at the ESG part in every single business case, but also in the last few years, we have implemented 20% of the supplier criteria to address ESG factors.
Yeah.
So we do not work with any supplier that does not meet those criteria that we have set. And of all the criteria that we have, 20% make up ESG criteria.
Wow, this is really impressive. I will just be picky here, and from this question, I'll just ask the second part of it. What do you think about carbon offsets? How big of a part they've been as part of your reduction strategy?
We are implementing targets that are according to the Science Based Target Initiative, SBTI, and SBTI looks at the company strategies and sees whether they are aligned with the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees, and only if then those targets are SBTI approved. So we are looking at compensation in certain projects. That's, for example, something where we just can't reduce certain emissions. For example, now I got to think about the English word for that. Generators. So if our network doesn't work, but people still do need internet for a certain period of time, or because of something that happened, such as the flood in the Ahrtal in Germany last year, that's something where we have generators that cannot be sustainably run just yet. But that's a
Mhm.
minimal amount of thing, and that's something where we use offsetting. But that can only be a step towards reducing it. And yeah, we can't say that we're climate neutral unless we've reduced it. So
Yeah. Which is a fundamental, I think, learning still for many businesses that by buying credits, you're not all of a sudden sustainable or aligned to some science based targets. You really need to do the effort to reduce your emissions, align them to what is within the 1.5-degree agenda, and compensate only where it's not possible to reduce.
And if I can add on that, maybe compensating is not compensating, right? There's so many different standards,
Yeah.
and we have set ourselves very, very strict standards. So we would not compensate with any company. We would not compensate in, for any standard. That's something that we look at very, very closely.
Yeah, which is really what we also encourage our clients, because we think that being focused on achieving targets would mean that you really need to be focused on making your business resilient to the future, and your business is only resilient to the future if you have aligned to the reality that climate risk is financial risk, which maybe leads me to the next question that someone also sent over, that is, has it been a challenge for you to align this vision that we need to focus on the bottom line and we need to focus on sustainability as two conflicting ideas? I think both you and I know that they're not, but
Yeah.
has there been some cases where you had to think about convincing someone?
I feel like that's actually something that people are not aware of once they hear about ESG for the very first time. So when we address people with that who have not had anything to do with sustainability before, they might think that it might have a negative financial impact. But we are a public company. So we are heavily influenced by shareholders and our investors. And the investor market is just really, really focusing on ESG as well. So looking at ESG and really taking it seriously is not negatively financially impacting any company, but is on the one hand actually good in the short run, but also in the long term, because you will just not be able to run a business literally sustainably if you do not think about those the future in terms of ESG, but also what the what people are looking at, investors are looking at, but also employees are looking at. You will not get any good employees either if you do not have a purpose, if you do not focus on sustainability.
I think the comment you just made is really nicely connected to one, I would call it really cute request that someone sent, because clearly you've motivated people who want to contribute to your cause. So the question is, do you take volunteers? Do you work with people who want to volunteer for some of the causes that you have been developing, especially students?
So we take a lot of interns at Vodafone. If you because in regards to students, that's normally in regards to an internship, right? So yes, please do apply. We always have at least 2 interns in our team as well, because that's just fantastic to also get the Gen Z perspective on those topics. And we have worked with volunteers, I believe. But to be honest, I would love to come back to you on that question. So if you want to PM me on LinkedIn, then I'm happy to discuss that.
So we established that there's ways in which people can engage with you in one way or another, even if their volunteering is
Literally.
not an option. Yeah. As we're coming close to the end of our discussion, I think just to kind of maybe round the topic that we covered, clearly you have been pioneering within an industry that is leading the way for many industries, in my opinion. We obviously analyze as Planet quite a lot of different companies, industries, and what we see is that there is a lot of work to be done in many other topics, but telecom and Vodafone in particular are definitely paving the way for many. We covered a lot of ground on scope three, on assessments, the achievements you've had so far. We also looked into quite a few of the initiatives that you've kicked off, which are definitely really robust. Um, we also discussed a little bit more about the suppliers and how you engage with your third parties. I also have been kind of listening to how you speak about things, and clearly you have a personal enthusiasm for this. Maybe just to touch upon with the few final questions that we have, your development within the topic, and how do you feel from today's perspective, given what we're seeing? Clearly, there's a lot of movement on the sustainability topic, but there's also not always the best news that we hear, especially the last 2 days. There's been the Cambridge study that was saying that we need to finally develop scenarios for elimination of humanity. It's not always easy to work in sustainability. How do you deal with that? How do you keep on going with so much enthusiasm and clearly a lot of positivity?
Um, I mean, I could also ask you the same question, right? Because we're kind of like in the same bubble, and it's interesting when you speak to someone about your job or my job, then people are like, yeah, and the flood and the heat waves and the Cambridge study and various other studies. And then I'm always like, yeah, welcome to my job. My job is obviously full of bad news every single day, but at the same time, it's so great to see how many amazing people work in that industry and how much is happening. So I feel like we can be very positive because there's such great people working on those matters, and more companies really understanding what has to be done in order to achieve those global targets that we have set ourselves.
Amazing. So when the tribe is big, then the enthusiasm keeps on growing. I can definitely confirm that as well because I just look at my team, and that's more than enough for me to know that on a bad day, things are looking really fine for us
Yeah,
because
right.
there's just a lot of excitement. One question that popped up a few times, and I think it's definitely one before last to finish on is, what project under your management at the moment excites you the most?
I mean, I've mentioned that before, the one for one promise and the phones, but what I really, really love is the whole circular economy approach that we take, both for our business customers as well as for our private consumers. And all the collaborations that we've done in the last few months as well, not only closing the loop, but also with Recommerce to really bring in a new trade-in scheme with repair options. So yeah, and really introducing that circular economy customer journey and bring everyone on board, no matter whether for employees, sustainability managers, or our consumers.
Amazing. And as a final question, what is maybe the thought that you would like to leave people working in the same topic as you, maybe as heads of sustainability, um, and maybe people that just want to enter still the industry?
That's something that I keep telling, yeah, that I keep saying as well, is it's such an interesting industry because you really get the chance to specialize yourself into whether it's circular economy or sustainable finance or energy. It's such a broad spectrum that you can really address and where you can really build a USP. It's a very new industry. Every single company will need you at some point. And that's something that's just really exciting about the industry. And again, I love the network within the sustainability industry as well. It's really people pushing each other, people really bringing out the best in each other. So that's something that's really great about our industry, I think, as well.
Amazing. Absolutely agree with this. Thank you so much, Teresa, for being today with us on this sunny August day. And we look forward to seeing what more you're going to be achieving, clearly on a track to pave the way for many others. And thank you so much for sharing with us your enthusiasm and your ideas and projects.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. With this, I close, and I invite you to check out the next event that we have, actually, because in August, there's a lot of maybe more time for people to educate themselves on sustainability and other topics. We actually have two events. So, in 2 weeks' time, we have a fantastic opportunity to learn about the food industry and how do you decarbonize the food industry from Aditi from Systemic, which is a phenomenal consulting company focused specifically on systemic change that we partner with. Thank you so much. See you soon and enjoy this day. Bye.